Hey guys, so this week I had a little hiccup where I didn't hit record on my camera, but recorded a great podcast episode all about how to be comfortable, or rather step into your discomfort with being intimate and vulnerable, and also how I see the idea of letting things go. So this is my longest podcast episode that I recorded, and it is actually really like what I thought was a really good one. I don't want to let this audio go to waste, so instead of having a video this week, you will have an image of me and hear me talking about letting things go and also stepping into being intimate and vulnerable. These are also questions that I got on YouTube and TikTok. So thank you so much for your questions. And I had a great time answering them this week. I really appreciate them.
How did I get comfortable with being intimate and vulnerable, and how do I let things go? These are some great questions that I've been asked lately that I want to use this podcast episode to answer. So let's get into it. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to a new episode of the Mini Mira Show. This is a podcast about spirituality, life philosophy, emotions, and so much more. I'm your host, Amira Sookram, and I'm the author of the Guilt Free Goals book, and I'm writing my second book all about feelings-based living now. So I want to start with this great question that I got on my YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments because I would love to help you with anything that you have going on right now. So this question said, how did you get comfortable with being intimate and vulnerable? Because no matter what I try, I have difficulty with it. First off, I think anyone has difficulty with it. I think that maybe because I have been showing up online in so many ways for the past, let's say, 8 or 9 years of my life, I maybe come across as being more comfortable with vulnerability and intimacy. That's one area of my life. And because I've practiced it for so long, it does a little bit translate to other areas of my life. But I would say that I still have very great difficulties with being intimate and vulnerable. And if I have to enter a situation where I may be facing my fears of rejection or abandonment, I would say that I always have to talk about my feelings in some way to somebody that I'm really comfortable with. And I can think of two people recently in my life who have just heard me talk a lot about my discomfort around being intimate and vulnerable. So, my answer to how to get comfortable with it is really that you might never be comfortable with being intimate and vulnerable in certain situations. And that's okay. The idea here is really to get comfortable with your discomfort. And that's duality, really. It's really not about just being like comfortable all the time. We have to have moments in our life where we step actively into discomfort. So, this can be done in many ways, but my favorite way is to practice actually being uncomfortable. For me, that was practicing Ashtanga yoga and really doing a practice with my physical body that put me in a state of being uncomfortable. Sometimes, when you're in a really twisty yoga pose or you're holding a headstand for like a minute, not that those are the only ways to practice discomfort in yoga, but when you have to enter into situations willingly where you know you're going to be uncomfortable, you are going to up your ability to sit with discomfort. And a lot of what I talk about with practicing emotional literacy is all about sitting with the discomfort of our emotions because it can be really uncomfortable to really feel hurt or to really feel our disappointment fully. At the same time, when we're really uncomfortable with feeling hurt deeply, we might also be uncomfortable with feeling joy deeply as well. And so, the reason why I push practicing emotional literacy and to sit with your uncomfortable emotions is that when we sit with our discomfort more, we are more able to feel our comfort. The other part of it is pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. So we have this comfort zone that we sit in, and when we are always comfortable, it can be very hard to push ourselves into situations that we really desire for our lives. So I knew that I would love to get into content creation. And even sitting here to film these videos every single week is a bit of a discomfort for me because I've never done it before. I've never consistently made video content for YouTube and shown up in that way when I've been creating content. And so because it's new, it is uncomfortable. And there are fears that come with that discomfort. So if I am putting myself out there on YouTube, I have the fear of being maybe judged by other people, or maybe not growing in the other way that YouTubers grow, or not hitting the mark in the ways that I want to. Or even putting out videos that are imperfect. Like a lot of people will say, oh, your mic's blocking, or we see the ring on your glasses. And it's like, I know these things. I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone to sit with that imperfection as I learn the process that I need to so that I can get into my growth zone. So after we leave our comfort zone, we enter this fear zone. And then from our fear zone, when we sit with those fears or push past them, we can learn and grow. So, with being vulnerable, let's say in a romantic relationship, if I have to be dating somebody and I have to tell them, hey, I only want to be seeing you right now. When I do that, that is putting myself into a fear zone because I'm putting myself in a position to be rejected by somebody else. And from that point of rejection, I have the ability to learn about myself and about the other person, and I can grow my communication and the way I step into vulnerability and intimacy in the future. And I would never be able to do that if I didn't take the risk of being intimate and vulnerable. And even in the situations where we think there's zero risk to be intimate and vulnerable, there is always like some sort of risk. There is the best friend who makes a joking comment instead of just being compassionate in the moment. There are partners that will reject your intimacy because they're having a bad day. There's always this idea that somebody can reject us when we're being intimate and vulnerable. And I love that Brene Brown has this idea of talking about a vulnerability hangover because when we enter into this risk, we are putting our nervous systems in a very overactive state. And from that overactive state, we need to rest after. And it's like when you go out on a night of drinking, you need to rest the next day to deal with your hangover and what you've done to your body, as just another way of putting it. And this is also something that comes from a night of drinking. We might be more vulnerable, our inhibitions might go down, and then the next day we feel that vulnerability hangover and we have to sit with it and deal with it. And you know what? It is uncomfortable. And so we want to practice being in this discomfort zone because it helps us learn and grow. And it helps us get more of what we desire because we're willing to take risks to get there. So, thank you so much for whoever asked this question. I really appreciate it. And it is a great question because it might be easy to look at people online and think they're really comfortable with being intimate and vulnerable, but most people are not. And even if somebody seems that way, they probably have moments where they're on their own and they really question things they've said or being too outspoken. Like, no one is perfect. No one is able to do everything very easily. Some things come more easily to other people, but it's also probably because they had acceptance around it. They've been taught to surrender to those parts of themselves, and they have been willing to learn and grow in ways that maybe other people around them have not. And so they maybe stand out in that way. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the same fears as you. They've just taken the time to really work through it, or it comes up when they least expect it. So it's something everyone goes through. And even just asking this question, I'm really proud of you because it means that you're really thinking about how to step out of your comfort zone. And I think you can do it. Okay. And very quickly, I want to answer this question about like, how do we let things go? I don't really think that we actively let things go. I don't think it's a passive process either. I just think that we have very little control in our lives around what we hold on to and what we let go. The way I think of it is that when we have big emotions that come up, or when we're really attached to expectations or situations, we are going to hold on more. And so when I think of letting go, I think of surrendering to our emotions so that we can understand them and process them. And part of that for me, like I just think about when I had to move on from like exes, and a big relationship for me was 5 years long. It ended. And for a few years after that, I would say that I held on to a lot of anger and I had trouble moving on and not thinking about that situation in the same way. And then one day I was like, you know what? It's okay for me to be angry. Like, I surrender to the anger. I'm not going to try and change it anymore. I'm just going to allow myself to be. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be bitter. I'm going to be upset. And I sat with it. And then I accepted it and I surrendered to it. And eventually, because I accepted that part of myself, it changed because it finally didn't feel like grasping anymore. It just felt like, here, this is me. This is who I am. And because I surrendered to it, I allowed it to shift and flow as it needed to. And I didn't hold on to that feeling as if I'm always going to be angry. It was just like, I am angry right now. I accept that. That is what it is. So when I think of letting go, I really think that it is a surrender to each moment. And when we are able to let things go, it's really being able to sit with those emotions and be with them. If we can't be in the moment, and this is a kind of a practice of stoicism or mindfulness, is that we don't have control over anything. So all we can do is surrender in each moment. I don't have control whether or not I forgive myself. I don't have control over whether or not I forgive another person. I just am in the moment, and whatever is coming up is coming up. And I can choose to observe it instead of attaching to it. And this is a really hard practice, and it goes back to like my yoga teachings and what I've learned from yoga philosophy is that we are we have to step into the role of the observer and into mindfulness to be able to flow with each moment. And flowing with each moment to me is letting go. Because in this moment, I'm not the person that I was when I started this podcast. I've let that moment go and I'm continuing forward. Or maybe not even continuing forward because that's an attachment to the future. It's really, I am here. I am. And that's it. So, in terms of letting go, Marianne Williamson has a practice that I love, and it's when we really want to let things go and we want to let somebody go or a situation go or an emotion go. We give it up to a higher power. We say, hey, I'm angry. I don't know what to do with this anger anymore. Please help me. I give it up to God, I give it up to the universe, and whatever you need me to go through or whatever you need me to do, give me what I need and I will do it. And I will just keep moving forward. And I accept where I'm at. I accept that this anger is here and I'm asking for help. And that is a beautiful practice to just accept that emotion fully and be able to give it up to a higher power to let the universe kind of take over and give us what we need. So, those are two options, really practicing emotional literacy and surrendering to it, surrendering to the emotion, surrendering to what's going on. Instead of actively trying to let it go, we sit with it and we surrender. Or we say, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm giving this up to a higher power and I will continue on. And that is another form of surrender and acceptance. So, for this week, if you have any questions that you would like to leave for me after listening to these podcast episodes or about your emotions personally that you just really need help with, I invite you to leave a comment on YouTube or TikTok and say, hey, for the podcast, can you answer this question? And leave a question. And that is your invitation this week to think about a question that you have that you would really like help with and see what you can do with that question? Can you ask somebody in your life what you need to know? Can you ask me? Can you ask like another YouTuber? Can you ask a friend, a mentor, a teacher? But really think about a question that you would love the answer to and sit with it, surrender to it, and step into your discomfort of actively being willing to be intimate and vulnerable and share your question. That's it for this week. If you like the podcast, please like, share, subscribe, support it in any way that is possible for you. You can always join my Patreon at its lowest tier just to support my content. And I want to thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate anyone who listens to this. I'm so grateful for you. See you next Tuesday. Bye.